We are going to switch things up a little bit from what we normally do on here. We will be talking about legal documents in a big lawsuit. Actually, a combination of multiple lawsuits come together, but this one is a little more Hollywood than what we usually do, where we cover all things Alex Murdaugh. If you're new to the channel, my style is not like most of the Hollywood videos you'll see. I podcast about all the little details that are found in legal documents. So most of this story has been covered in short little TikTok videos, or reels, or pretty short YouTube videos. So if that's the style you're used to, it's not what we do here. Here we go through, as I said, all of the details of legal documents. The story we're covering today is one that's been all over the news for the past several weeks. One was filed by Justin Baldoni against the New York Times. Another was Justin Baldoni against Blake Lively, her husband Ryan Reynolds, and Blake's PR representative. Yet another was Blake Lively against Justin Baldoni, his company Wayfair, the CEO of his company, and the movie they made together itself. In the end of December, Blake Lively had filed not an official lawsuit, but a complaint. And that kind of started everything. She didn't just do that though. She tried her case in the media by feeding her side of the story to the New York Times. The New York Times, late at night, almost 10 o'clock at night, notified Justin Baldoni and his company that this article was going to run the next day, giving them a deadline of noon. Less than 14 hours later, and most of those 14 hours was overnight. They scrapped together a quick denial in the little time they had, submitted it at 10, and though they were supposed to have till 12 to make a statement, so technically they had 2 more hours to add anything else that they wanted to add. But at 10 o'clock, when the New York Times got the statement, they went ahead and put the story out. The other side, which I'll stop naming all of them because it just gets too repetitive, so when I say Justin Baldoni, I mean him and all of the ones involved on his side of the lawsuit. But after this article was published, very one-sided, went by information that Team Justin claims was not true or were little clips of conversations taken out of context. That's what moved him to file this lawsuit. And another lawsuit where Justin's original PR person sued a second one who had started off by working for her company, then went out onto her own, as well as a crisis management expert that was hired. This is Stephanie Jones of Jones Works, and she says these two started a smear campaign against Blake behind Justin's back and stole her clients. Then she features in Justin's lawsuit with the accusation that she leaked information to Team Blake. So there was already quite a stack of lawsuits to get through. Now where we are now, the official lawsuit against Blake Lively happened on January the 16th. That was document 1 in this long list. And ultimately, these other cases have all been combined together under this one. There is a whole lot of information to try to catch up on. I'm going to try to do that as quickly as I can because on Monday, due to the amount of motions and letters, a pre-trial conference that had been scheduled for February the 12th has now been rescheduled for Monday at 11 a.m. And it's there to quickly deal with several dockets that have been filed. And as I go through, I'll point those out to you so you know exactly what's going to be decided on Monday. A lot of accusations have been made on both sides. At this point in time, Blake has made some very serious accusations against Justin Baldoni, claiming that he acted in a sexually inappropriate manner. And the really nice thing about these documents is they contain so many pieces of evidence, not even just in the exhibits. This is the first time I've seen so many little screenshots right in the legal documents themselves. Then you get to the exhibits and there's even more. But where we're starting today, instead of going back to that very first complaint, after these lawsuits were all consolidated into one, Team Justin on January 31st filed an amended complaint. This time, the complaint itself is 224 pages. Then it has an exhibit that's 168 pages. Now, in the original lawsuits against each other, Blake had made these accusations against Justin using clips of conversations and text messages. She'd also claimed that a slew of people behind her had the same complaints. So when Justin filed his initial complaint, he showed instances where screenshots of text messages had actually been altered, where also just little segments of them had been posted in her lawsuit, but he showed the whole context around it. He had also, in his lawsuit against the New York Times, had already addressed quite a few of her accusations against him. Not just about the allegations of inappropriate behavior, but he told an entire story of how Blake Lively sort of hijacked the whole movie, little by little, starting with wardrobe, rewriting lines for herself initially, and later for others. Then getting involved in the editing until finally taking over the editing completely, using editors that had nothing to do with the movie. We'll see messages between her and Justin where she talks about writing things that she later in interviews attributes to her husband writing these things. Her husband, who is not named anywhere in the production of this movie. She also calls in editors that have nothing to do with this movie, and she names them later in interviews. In order to get her good friend Taylor Swift's music into the movie, she also uses a composer that is not named anywhere, credited anywhere on this movie. There's a big problem with these things because legally in the production of a movie, all of these people have to be under contract, written agreements, and they have to be named and credited for their work. None of these people were. Allegedly, they were simply people that Blake on the side said, "Hey, I've got all the filming from my movie, help me put it together." And what's interesting is with all of these allegations having been made already in her suit against Justin and the movie and the production company of the movie, she didn't mention any of this part. She's just stressing on this alleged inappropriate behavior, which I find very suspicious indeed. After being accused of hijacking a movie and using people who were not supposed to be part of production, and you don't defend yourself against that, it's very, very suspicious indeed. This has also brought out a lot of stuff on social media of former feuds she's had with other people that she worked with. People who have worked with Justin have started coming out and posting on their own social media accounts how wonderful a person he is to work for, and that they never, ever had issues like these accusations while they worked with him. So it's a very interesting story indeed. But as I said, we're going to do this in the Cassidy style, and that means going through the actual documents. I don't like to dwell in rumor. I don't like to state things that I haven't seen actual legitimate support for. So that's where we're going to base this completely off of these legal documents, the exhibits, and I will have sprinkled throughout clips of Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni speaking about this movie out of their own mouths. That way we know these sources are legitimate, and that's what we'll form our opinions on, and not just rumors that are out there. So let's get started. So as I said, we're starting up after all of these lawsuits were blended together into one, and that begins with document 50, the amended complaint. The caption has now changed. We have Blake Lively versus Wayfarers on top, and the secondary caption, Wayfarer Studios, Justin Baldoni, and the rest of those versus Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, her PR person, and the New York Times. And you can see up on the right, it shows the blending of these different trials that have now been consolidated together for pre-trial purposes. Now, everywhere I have scoured on the internet, one thing strikes me as always true. Justin Baldoni appears to be a very kind, very gentle soul. During the premiere, when he was banished to the basement and not allowed to appear with any of the rest of the other cast, he still had nice things to say about Blake Lively. And so this amended complaint starts off in that same way. It says the following is not a story the Wayfarer parties ever wished to tell. Unfortunately, Blake Lively has unequivocally left them with no choice. And they state how they had to set the record straight in response to her accusations and this New York Times article that they say maliciously and recklessly propagated falsehoods. Now, what they have always alleged is that when Blake Lively set out to promote this movie, that it was the manner in which she did so that caused a press catastrophe. For the sake of time, I'm going to do a separate podcast that does more of a deep dive into what this press catastrophe was. For now, let's just leave it very brief. She was highly criticized for the manner in which she promoted this movie. This movie, for those of you who haven't seen it, deals with a very serious topic. It's based on a book written by Colleen Hoover. In it, main character Lily Bloom, that's played by Blake Lively, grew up in a household where her father was very abusive to her mother. Now she's all grown up and in a relationship of her own. This person is played by Justin Baldoni. Now we see them falling in love and becoming a couple, ultimately getting married and having a baby. The movie's been out for a while and is already available on Netflix, so probably most of you who ever wanted to see it have already seen it. So I will be exposing some bits of the movie that may be considered spoiler alerts. If you've not watched the movie and you don't want to hear these, I recommend going to Netflix and watching it and then coming back. The message of the book and the message that I had taken from the movie before I knew about any of this other drama was that I was very grateful that a story like this was being told. Because we often, way too often, and if you've followed me for a while, you know that I love to put statistics out there of how many women are killed every day by partners or former partners. It is very, very rare that these murders happen without having had years of some type of abuse in the history of the relationship. In a lot of cases, police have been called multiple times already to deal with situations of domestic violence. Too many women stay after these situations have happened. What was so good about this one is that one of the reasons women stay when they're being abused is that they have children and they're afraid to set out on their own without a man to support them, or they don't want their children growing up in a broken home. And so they submit their children to domestic violence. Now in this case, we have Lily Bloom, the main character, who ultimately chooses not to submit her daughter to this life. As you can probably guess by the title of this movie, it ends with us. So the hope of the author and of Justin was that they could help women in these situations. I do also like how it was portrayed. You don't see gratuitous violence, but you see the first few situations. They happen very quickly, and they happen in a way that you can't really say exactly what happened. And you look at her response, it's kind of confused. He's telling her, oh, this was an accident. And it takes a long time before the character actually reflects on these incidents, and you see this towards the end before she makes that decision. Whereas earlier in the movie, we just saw this really quick flash that we weren't sure what happened. We see her go through the sequence of events, and you see the full incident each time of how it actually happened. And it's then that she realizes all the times she questioned her recollection of what happened, as opposed to his explanation of what happened. The rose-colored glasses come off, and she sees these situations as they actually happened. And in the end, makes her decision based on those things and the knowledge that these things could and probably would continue to happen if she were to stay. So the book itself had already been a viral best-selling book. Very much talked about on Book Talk, and people were really looking forward to seeing that story told in a movie. So when Blake Lively began to promote this on her Instagram, and you can go to her Instagram and see these things for yourself, which is what I did, you don't find anything related to the main story of this book and this movie. You find Blake Lively making it all about fashion and two of her businesses. There are no phone numbers for people enduring abuse to reach out to. There are no organizations that deal with this topic. Nothing except Blake and the list of what she's wearing. You also find in a party thrown for one of her companies, Betty Boo's, you find a party thrown in the style of the flower shop that she owned in the movie. So she's using the movie and tagging the movie to self-promote her own businesses. A lot of people took issue specifically with the Betty Boo's company because, as statistics show, alcohol is behind more than half of domestic abuse incidents, and that's just the reported ones. So people found it to be very tone-deaf that she would use a movie like this to promote alcohol. They also found it very strange that the majority of her posts about the movie were her posing in floral outfits. And that's what she was telling people, wear your florals and come see the movie, as if it were a story simply about a flower shop. Her second business is a hair care product business that she launched at the same time as the movie was launching. And people felt that she had done that on purpose as well, again to self-promote that business. In one interview with the co-star, the host asked about people reaching out who might be in a situation of domestic abuse, to which her answer was seen by many to be very tone-deaf. She makes a joke of it. Not a funny joke, a sarcastic one.
Understands the themes of this movie, comes across you in public, and they want to really talk to you. What's the best way for them to be able to talk to you about this? How would you recommend they go about it?
Like asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share. Or I could just location share you and then we could...
So basically, her comment led people to think she couldn't care less about your problem. And you can't expect an actress to offer themselves, but she should have at least offered an organization, some kind of hotline, or some kind of website, instead of a sarcastic remark. Even her co-star looks aggravated at her about this comment. On the other hand, Justin introduces a company that he's been working with since 2022 that he's pledged to give 1% of the movie's proceeds in order to help them help women. He tags this organization on all of his promotional posts. He gives interviews with them to introduce them to people. He takes DMs that people have sent to him about the situation that they've been in, and he shares that. All of his promotion is directed towards solutions and help for women in these situations.
Story, the question that's always asked is, why did she stay? And that's the wrong question.
Yeah.
What we need to be asking ourselves is, why do men harm?
Yes.
And that was the big thing for me, and what I've learned more and more and more of.
He points out that this message is the reason he chose this book to make a movie out of. It took him 5 years to make this movie, and that was the whole driving force behind it. He's an author of multiple books aimed at teaching men to embrace the parts of their personality that society tends to tell men not to expose, to hide it away because it's feminine. A quick perusing of his Instagram account, you'll see causes like this intertwined. You'll see a couple of people with fatal illnesses, whose story he shared. You'll see plenty of postings with his beautiful wife and family, his wife who must be so angry about these accusations being leveled at her husband. But there's a night and day contrast between these two accounts, and it goes way back. So having seen her Instagram and her style of promotion, a lot of people came out and began to criticize her. In the book, her character is 23, far younger than Blake Lively's age of 37. Now, if she were her character's age, you might give her a little bit of credit and say she doesn't have enough life experience to know this. But being that she's almost 40, it's really inexcusable. And what happened is once this started being talked about, we know what social media is like these days. TikTokers, reel makers, podcasts, YouTubers, they all started digging through to past grievances about her. And it turns out she has made enemies with fellow cast members from TV shows and movies, and has given plenty of tone-deaf and outright rude interviews since she first started in the business. With cancel culture being what it is, she's actually quite fortunate that people didn't start calling for her cancellation. But people did start digging up and sharing these old clips of her interviews, and they paint a picture of a not very nice person. She even joined in on attacking Princess Catherine, made a mocking post about a photo that people said was photoshopped. Later, when Princess Catherine had to come out and tell the world her private health business to stop the rumors and stop the attacks, told the world she had cancer, then Blake had to make an apology. But what this lawsuit is claiming is that when this stuff came out, rather than admitting or at least realizing, well, hey, this might be because of something I've done and maybe I need to change what I'm doing here, she decided it can't be me. It must be that rotten old Justin. And that's where the accusations began, saying that he had started a smear campaign against her. So back to this, he says that if she had just moved on, that the truth about her would have never had to have been known. What truth is he talking about? That she deliberately and systematically robbed the Wayfarer parties, Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios, of their movie. It goes on, no one except the parties involved would have known that she used threats and extortion to relegate the colleagues she once highly praised to a basement to sit out their own premiere while she enjoyed the spotlight of a premiere and after party that was ultimately co-financed by both Wayfarer and Sony. She would have gotten away with these things and more because Baldoni, focused entirely on seeing the film succeed, would have held his tongue, as he had through the year and a half that Lively tormented him, his family, and his partners. And there's a footnote to this that points to that exhibit that I told you about that is a timeline of the sequence of events. It expands on that in point 3, saying that she couldn't tolerate her publicly tainted image for even a moment and couldn't accept that it was entirely of her own making, and so she needed a scapegoat. Rather than admit and take accountability, she chose to blame the Wayfarer parties in a malicious and unforgivably public manner. And then we find another part of the story. She gets her husband involved. And you will see screenshots about this later. She gets her husband, Ryan Reynolds, involved in the whole thing. They prepare a statement that they tell him to read. And he simply would not do it, because in that statement, he would have had to admit that he had said sexually inappropriate things, which he still holds he never did. So the lawsuit says when Ryan and Blake could not force Justin and his company to read this statement, that's when she started to prepare this attack. And we're going to go through and we're going to see communication between Blake and Justin when this stuff was supposed to have been happening. Now, in the earlier complaint, they had just speculated that she had worked with the New York Times for some time. But one of the things that internet sleuths have dug up is the metadata of some of these things that have come out. So now they have a little more support to that idea. And we'll see all that later in this case. Now here's what she did first. As I mentioned earlier, she didn't go straight to filing a lawsuit. And in the earlier complaint, they say that she did this as a sort of self-protection. She filed an administrative complaint with the Civil Rights Department in California. Now, this had come up a lot when this case first started being leaked, because she was able, through this complaint, to get subpoenas for information. Normally, you cannot get subpoenas without having filed a lawsuit. Now, I know nothing about California-specific law, but I was reading some different attorneys having a discussion about this, and some of them were California attorneys. And even they were not familiar with how you get a subpoena in this manner. But apparently there's some kind of loophole if you use this kind of complaint filed through the Civil Rights Department in California, you can get subpoenas. The other part about this kind of complaint is if you file a lawsuit straight up, there's rules about discovery and sharing discovery. There's rules about depositions, where if you file a lawsuit, you have to be questioned on the record, on camera, in a deposition. But with this sort of complaint, you don't have to. This kind of complaint is very one-sided and doesn't offer protection to the defendants like an actual lawsuit would have. What's more is the accusation here is that she had already spent months feeding falsehoods to the New York Times for this story, which makes it even worse that they only provided 14 hours, most of which were overnight, to the other side to make a defense. This is very badly done, New York Times. You're not supposed to be taking sides like that as professional journalists of a very long-standing, well-established newspaper. But they say on Information and Belief, Blake Lively took this complaint that unlike lawsuits which are public, these are private, but that they believe that she leaked this to the New York Times. Now, when news of this complaint got out, the public had even more questions. Hey, if this really happened, why haven't you filed an actual lawsuit? So after 11 days, this lawsuit was filed. Team Justin feels that she never actually intended to file a lawsuit, but just thought by leaking this complaint, especially in a medium like the New York Times, that would have been enough to get her story out there to make herself look better and make Justin look bad. And when you turn to such an accusation as sexual inappropriateness, that's a big one. Most of the time, we women don't like to second-guess a fellow woman who makes this kind of complaint, especially after the Me Too movement. So they feel she used these kinds of accusations as a shield. Something Team Justin shared a lot in the first complaint was that for the sake of the movie, he put up with a lot. He didn't want anything to affect the message of the movie. He was willing to be done wrong, willing to have his movie that he'd worked 5 years on be snatched and taken from him if that message could have a positive impact in the world. But now he says he's heartbroken because all of that has been completely overshadowed by this lawsuit and these accusations. Point 6, he says she has immense power as one of the world's best-known celebrities. Now, when I started thinking about that, I flipped through her career, and she hasn't really been in any kind of amazing blockbuster movies, or at least not played important roles in the bigger movies she's been in. Her power comes from her husband, who is one of the world's best-known celebrities. It also comes from her good friend, Taylor Swift. I am a Swiftie. I adore Taylor Swift and her music. So I feel sickened, and you'll see she uses Taylor Swift several times in this whole sordid business as a weapon. She also uses her husband, and you'll see that too if she were not married to Ryan Reynolds and were not friends with Taylor Swift. Based on just her acting career alone, I dare say no one would call her powerful or one of the world's best-known celebrities. And then it goes on to talk about the ways that she demanded and later blackmailed, really, production into allowing her increasingly more and more power in the production of this movie. And again, we're going to see that in the timeline. 7 and 8 go into a little more detail about what we've already talked about, the way that she promoted the film, promoting her hair care and her alcoholic beverages, and the way Justin promoted it. How this led to backlash, how she became regularly referred to as tone-deaf and insensitive, and that's all stuff we can simply Google and find. She doubled down even harder against Justin. He says that her making this kind of accusation, that she did it knowing full well that these types of allegations are a career death sentence. And he adds that she didn't expect that they would be able to meet these allegations with concrete documentary evidence disproving her claims and demonstrating that they, not her, were the targets of a smear campaign. They accuse her of extortion, defamation, and further wrongdoing. But he said what she used her power to do was that she was not content to just be the actress that she was actually hired to be, but that she wanted total control. She started first with wardrobe, then marketing strategies, music, and ultimately creating her own cut of the film. In doing so, she didn't just harm Justin, but she cost numerous people their jobs. And he says that her decisions reflected her fundamental lack of understanding of the book, which came to no surprise because she didn't even read the book. It was a known fact on the set that Blake had refused to read the book. And let's look at one of those clips where she's being interviewed, and it's assumed because she gets, and we'll talk about this PGA, they say it's a very coveted producer credit that she ends up getting, and we'll see how she goes about getting that later too. But she has this credit. So people assume because this credit is so hard to get, and it has a lot of criteria and requirements that must be met to get it, so people assume that this is actually her film because that's the way she's portrayed it. And so if it were her film, that would mean she would have discovered the story, discovered the book, and wanted to make a film about it. So that's what the interviewer assumes. And listen to her answer.
First things first, you're a producer on this movie as well.
Yes.
Had you read the book and then you were like, I need to bring this to life? How did the whole film come to life?
Oh, well, that's so nice of you to acknowledge the producing because so many people want to talk about the acting. And honestly, the acting was the smallest contribution that I had to this film. So I was very fortunate to have such authorship in this story in a way that makes this movie so much more significant feeling, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm so excited to share it because of that. So no, I didn't find the rights to the book. I came into it once the movie was already a reality, and so it was really just about making sure that we honor the book as best as possible, and that we also were able to bring ourselves and some authenticity and hopefully even expand upon the book.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, and telling that is so much more than just the acting. It's in everything you see on screen, every sound you hear, the color of the movie, the production, the clothes, all of it. It's storytelling is in so many different mediums.
The sneaky way she answers this. At least she doesn't go so far as to claim she's the one who read the book and wanted the story told. But these comments are just, in my opinion, they're just disgusting when you look and you know that she never even read the book. 10 mentions again the tone-deaf press interviews, her promoting her products, and the footnotes mention something that she said early on, speaking to her co-star who was also the director and producer and part owner of the company who was making the film, who had secured the money to pay for the film. She said, "I'm afraid you have too much power." Because of his personality type, he reassured her that their relationship would be collaborative, and that's what started him bending over backwards to include her. And the footnote about the reading of the book, later she claims that she read the book, but the text evidence shows she had not, at least at the time of developing the movie, and she was specifically choosing not to read the book, even admitting to Googling the color of the character's hair rather than look for it in the book. She was against reading the book. It mentions specifically in the promoting of her alcoholic beverages that she named a drink after his character at the premiere after party using her booze. She named it Rile You Wait, another thing that set people off. Justin says this could have been avoided if she had not refused to meet with the film's domestic violence partner organization, nomore.org, as he had offered for her to do. And we'll see a lot of things he offers her that she refuses, well documented long before the problems began. And now here's where we hear about Stephanie Jones of Jones Work. As I mentioned, she was originally the PR firm that worked with Justin, but that she had found herself embroiled in a personal and professional crisis, stating that her erratic behavior had driven away not only high-profile clients, but her right-hand woman, Jennifer Abel, who is also a plaintiff in this case. They said that her behavior became very bizarre and that she began lashing out at loyal clients with rage-filled rants, and began refusing to comply with the direct instructions from her client's Wayfarer. So they cut ties with her. They say that after cutting ties with her, she was filled with rage and she saw an opportunity for revenge. So they say that when Jennifer Abel left her, she had to turn in the phone that had been provided to her by Stephanie Jones, who was her boss. That's normal. They believe that Stephanie Jones supplied all the information from Jennifer's phone to Blake. And the reason is in the footnote you can see, they say, while it's not entirely uncommon to request an exiting employee turn company property over, it's not often the case that personal phones, phone numbers, and communications are seized, made public, and weaponized against the employee and the company's own clients. So they're saying that texts were taken from this phone, were taken out of context, and supplied to Blake's team. As part of their proof of this, even though the other PR and crisis management people were targeted, Stephanie Jones remains unscathed, even though she was PR during this time period. Now, 16 comes back to that public apology that they wanted. Now, this comes about after the film's premiere. So this is the time period where there's really a big public backlash against Blake. So at this point, Blake and Reynolds draft a statement. They demand that Justin and his company and the CEO of his company read the statement to the public, or else gloves would come off. Now that's an outright threat. There's no way around it. When you tell someone that gloves are coming off, there's no other way to take that. Now WME is a huge talent agency. They handle the most famous people in the world. They say that some of these executives from this talent agency, WME, tell him that threats from Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are not to be taken lightly. But on the other hand, Justin and James Heath, they don't want to read this statement because it's admitting to false mistakes, things that they say they did not do. So in spite of these threats and what these threats might do to them personally and to their careers, they refuse to apologize. And that's when this New York Times article comes out. And the point of this article was that not only did he make these sexually advances on her, sexual harassments, but that out of fear of her coming forward, that they set out on a malicious smear campaign. That none of this bad press about Blake had anything to do with her actions. It all came from this smear campaign. And that the heart of the smear campaign was this sexual harassment. They point out the timing of this lawsuit. It was as these defendants who live in LA were evacuating their homes because of this devastating fire. So while they're gathering their kids, their pets, their go bags, and following these evacuation orders, fearing for their homes, Lively, from the safety of her penthouse in New York, deployed process servers in the midst of these troubling times. They point out again that these stars used their enormous power to steal an entire film right out of the hands of its director and production studio. And this really does seem to be at the heart of the matter, because that's what she in fact did. And nothing excuses that. If you have been sexually harassed while you're filming a movie, do you know what you do? You file a lawsuit. Immediately. You get that out in the open. You don't steal the film and then use the media to destroy someone. But they say that Team Blake used edited and little bits of conversations without context to build their lawsuit. But they said the Wayfarer parties are bringing not insinuations and selectively edited and context-free text snippets, but they're bringing all the evidence before the court and the public. And they say that when they have their day in court, that the jury will see that even the most powerful celebrity cannot bend the truth to her will. And that's another interesting point. This case started in the media with this article in the New York Times. Now, since then, Justin's lawyer has put out videos and clips and text messages to show specific things she has said happened did not happen the way she said. One of them was a video she claimed came with no sound. What she hadn't realized is that Justin was actually mic'd up during the filming. She claimed that he kept putting his lips on her and told her that she smelled so good and was speaking to her about his sex life and that the situation had nothing to do with filming. Little did she know that he had that tape and that the mics were on and you can hear every word said between them. You can see that it was in fact filmed for a montage that's going to have a song playing in the background. It's about them falling in love. They're dancing together, and here's the kicker. An intimacy expert was hired specifically to go through these scenes, to coach these scenes, and tell each of them what they should and shouldn't do. And guess what? Blake refused to meet with her. This is well documented. It was a conversation between the producers and the director about the situation of Blake refusing to meet with her. Instead, Blake wanted to decide how these scenes went. Justin is the director. Blake is supposed to be the actress, taking direction from the director and from the intimacy coach. But this is one of the many ways that she was able to have her way. So while they're dancing in this scene, they're discussing what this couple might be doing as they're falling in love. It is completely Blake's fault that they're winging it. Rather than him sniffing her and saying, "Oh, you smell so good," because he put his face on her neck, she says, "Oh, you're going to get my self-tan on you." To kind of say, it's okay, he says, "Oh, it smells good." He doesn't say, "Oh, it smells so good." She's worried that she's getting her self-tan on him, and he's like, "It's okay, it smells good."
I'm probably getting spray tan on you.
It smells good.
Well, it's not that. It's my body makeup.
He talks about him and his wife and their moments of how they show love, the way they look into each other's eyes. And then she mentions how her and Ryan are always talking. She wants it to be talking. He didn't want it to be talking. The scene is not supposed to have words. The scene is supposed to be them dancing with music in the background. It's supposed to have different clips of them falling in love. It's a montage, not a speaking moment that she's ruining because she won't shut up. But the point is, he's mic'd for this whole scene, so we get to hear exactly what was going on, and none of her claims about what happened in that moment actually happened. So his lawyer releases this. We can all watch it. It's kind of long, but I really recommend you go look for it and watch it and see who's telling the truth about this moment. And this is very important because this is one of the moments that's her main substance to the accusation that he acted sexually inappropriate with her, that he sexually harassed her. But what happens is after she's gone to the media with her New York Times article, when he starts dropping these text messages and these video clips that prove that she's not telling the truth, she doesn't very much care for it. So now, one of the big things that they're supposed to meet about on Monday is they want to muzzle his attorney. They want gag orders that say, hey, you can't be out here talking about this stuff. You can't be leaking this stuff to the press. After they've leaked all of this to the New York Times. That was all fine because it was her. But when they start to do it, oh, this has to be gagged. Another thing they want to do is file a motion to dismiss his lawsuit. Well, you can file that all you want. It happens all the time. Very little chance of this lawsuit getting dismissed. Point 21 goes into his career, things I've mentioned already, that he has made a career based on the idea of having a positive impact on the world. He's the one who read this book and was deeply moved by it. He's the one who reached out to the author asking her to please allow him to make this film because he wanted to save lives. It points out how his last two films were films like that with meaningful stories. That his directorial debut was a film 5 Feet Apart based on a woman living with cystic fibrosis. He documented her courageous plight, developing a friendship with her and promising her that he would tell her story. And that's what that movie was about. Her name was Claire Wineland, and she sadly has passed away. He remains close with her parents and supports her foundation. His more recent film was called Clouds, and that was a true story about a teenager with cancer. His name is Zach, and it focuses on him finding joyful purpose and inspiration in music. And it was the same motivations that brought Justin to this book and wanting to make a movie about it. When the author Colleen Hoover saw the movie 5 Feet Apart, she told Justin, you are the right person to make this movie. As part of the evidence, he shares their early emails where he spoke on his commitment to make this movie in a manner that would be impactful. And it was Hoover herself, the author, who suggested that Baldoni portray Ryle. And I really feel sorry for this author because someone had approached her previously about turning this book into a film. They used crowdsourcing, where they asked her fans to contribute towards the making of a movie, which they did. Then, the company who was supposed to make it into a movie did not, and she felt terrible for her readers because they had given their funding for that purpose and it didn't happen. But she tells him after watching his movie that she feels good about him and his past work and his passion. Says there's no one better for the project. Then she follows that up with an email saying, have you given any thought to whether you would want an acting role in this? Say maybe Ryle? I could see it. Now, as the film's in development, Wayfarer is still a kind of small production company, so they end up partnering with Sony because financing a film is very expensive. So Sony joins in. But when they make the proposal for this, Justin insists that he's staying with his original plan that began in September of 2022, that 1% of the film's proceeds must be donated to this organization called No More. So we see, as Blake will later claim, that he starts promoting the film, tagging this organization just to make himself look better. But it's very clear that even before Sony signed on, that was a condition to them signing. They had to agree to this. And that this actually began in September of 2022, years before. And we see it wasn't just Justin, but the CEO, James Heath, also talked about his hopes for the film. In an interview with Forbes on June 28, 2024, he speaks of those who've been hurt. He wants them to feel seen, and he feels the story was told in a way that honored them. And he's hoping that people who may hurt somebody might think twice about it after seeing the film. And I really like his final statement. He says, I hope that people leave feeling that they got a glimpse into a world that oftentimes we turn our eyes away from. So he too wanted to bring attention to this problem as hopefully a way to lessen these kinds of things. They mention again in the footnotes that stunningly, Blake refused to meet with this organization, which makes no sense. They say that they brought Blake onto the project knowing that she had a reputation for being difficult to work with. But at the time, they found her to be genuine, and so the collaboration begins. It began on December 31st of 2022. In the negotiations, Blake was granted an executive producer credit. She wanted a producer credit, but both Wayfarer and Sony, not just Wayfarer, both of them felt that this title did not accurately reflect the role that she was asked to play. Her role was simply actor and executive producer. What's the difference? It's kind of confusing. But executive producers, there can be many of these on the same film. They tend to have more to do with things like creativity. But a producer, specifically one who gets a PGA, also called the producer's mark, this is a kind of certification. This has to be given to you by the Producers Guild. And this kind of producer is over all aspects of the entire movie. There are standards and procedures that have to be followed and criteria that has to be met for you to be given this mark. And it's a big thing that producers want. But in order to get it, you had to have performed the majority of producing functions. It's a kind of experience that a lot of actors would like to have, but very few actually get. She wanted it. So she asked for it in the beginning. Wayfarer and Sony said no, but you can be one of the executive producers. So bear in mind these two things. In the beginning, she said you have too much power to Justin. She wanted a producer credit, was given executive producer credit. Now he says in the beginning, it seemed that they would have a positive, collaborative, creative partnership. He said they worked closely. They traded ideas, that they shared stories and pictures from their lives. They spoke about family illnesses. They told jokes to each other. They shared memes with each other. He offered concern and support when she and her family got sick. That they texted almost daily and they had a friendly banter. All of these things established a comfortable dynamic. You will see proof of this. For example, and something about me, I see through people very easily. I can meet someone, and just by listening to them for a few seconds, I get a feel for the kind of person they are. I've always been like that. I notice everything. I see looks in the eye. I see facial expressions, body language. I don't always understand the meaning behind written texts, but my whole body will know if you're lying to me. But in this case, her texts are so descriptive and so long, you really can get a feel for the feeling behind it. I just feel like they're manipulative. I feel like she's pouring it on too thick. This kind of flattery. This stuff never works for me. I find it cheesy. I find it off-putting. I'm the person that a sleazy salesman could never get through to because I can see and I can feel, like I said, my whole body can feel when you're lying to me. My whole body can feel when there's manipulation and flattery. I feel the same. It's just such a good feeling to get work done that we're proud of and to do it together. It just clicks when we find it. And that's just as rewarding as filming it or editing it or marketing it or releasing it. This is all storytelling. This is why we do it. Thank you for your collaboration. I'm really proud of what we're doing. Do you see what I mean? It's too much. It's a sales pitch. And he says, I feel the same. It's such a good feeling to get. And he says, I like sentimental Blake. And she says, never met her. He says, I also like butthole Blake. Don't worry. And then ends the conversation. Okay, good night. So he said that. 7 seconds later, he's ending the conversation. Okay, good night. When someone says that, what are they saying? They're basically saying, bye, I'm done with this conversation, right? But she's not. She goes on further. Well, I've met her. And then says, so have my suppositories. And then she says good night as well. And he does a laugh reaction to the suppositories. Now keep the suppository comment in mind because the accusations that she puts at him later about things that he says that makes her uncomfortable, keep this one in mind because to me it is very hypocritical. What is a suppository? Someone says that first thing in your head. What do you picture? A little pill you shove up your butt, right? When you bring a word like this into your conversation, what does that say about your relationship? If you're talking to your boss, which in this case, he is her boss, he's her director, she's the actress. When you say a word, because I promise you, I have never felt close enough to one of my bosses to refer to something I shove up my butt, okay? It's inappropriate. What it makes you think about, what it is, everything about it. Gross. So what this says to me is that they have this kind of conversation where they do joke inappropriately and say stuff like that. So keep this conversation in mind. This is early on. This is May of 2023. This is the kind of relationship that they have. I'm not judging them for it. I'm simply saying this says a lot about the relationship they have. He didn't say the inappropriate thing. She did. Now, what happens after this? They've got this friendly relationship, as we can clearly see. Then what happens? He says almost immediately, she begins to insert herself into the production process in intrusive ways well beyond the scope of her contractual entitlements. Where does it start? It starts with wardrobe. Now, since most of us have no idea how wardrobe works in movies because we're not movie makers, we're not actors and actresses, he explains a little bit. He says, while lead actors are sometimes granted approval over their character's general look, they generally do not receive full control over wardrobe decisions without input from their director or producers. In fact, this is something that's done with the character in mind, not the actor. The director has a vision for who the character is, and the actor is supposed to do their best to make that character come to life. The actor doesn't come in and say, this is the character. That's already been decided, first in the book, then by the script, and then by the director's vision of that script. So before Blake is brought in, there's already been a wardrobe team. This team has met with the director, as they're supposed to, and they craft out a wardrobe based on the director's vision of the character. There's a budget for all of this. It's already been decided. It had already been shopped. The clothes were already there. But what happens? Blake starts sending hundreds of images to the costume designer. Now, I'm assuming these messages exist as evidence because it mentions them coming even late into the hours of the evening. So hundreds of images being sent when this poor costume designer is at home, probably getting ready for bed, has already shopped this movie based on what the director told them they wanted. And now the actress is saying, this is what I want. So what happens? Rather than say, hey, Blake, this is already done, they have to re-shop her wardrobe. And this screws up a lot of things. The costume designer, who has already shopped it, already spent the budget, who's supposed to be on the set to fit things, put them together, instead now has to go out and re-shop everything. Spend more money, more time, more resources. And then Blake, who between her and especially her husband have millions and millions of dollars, has no idea how to budget money, decides that her character can afford $5,000 shoes because the character has money, she says. Wayfarer is not some huge production company. They're a fledgling small business. They've teamed up with Sony to help them pay for this movie in the first place. But now they've got to spend more money because Blake wants her character to wear $5,000 shoes. So this script's been in the works for well over a year. It was approved not just by him and his company, but by Sony. There are notes from the director. There are notes from the author. None of that matters. The wardrobe budget is now ballooned. To make matters worse, Blake lives 15 minutes from the production office, but she can't be bothered to come to the office for her wardrobe fittings. Instead, the costume department has to pack up the wardrobe and deliver it to her home, loading it on trucks, driving through Manhattan, unloading it, bringing it up to her home, letting her try it on, and hauling it all back. This costs more time, more money, when she simply could have driven 15 minutes and tried the clothes on. None of this was in her contract negotiations. None of it was included in the budget. And they point out this producer credit that she wanted so bad. She was given executive producer. One of her responsibilities as one of the executive producers is to pay heed to the budget and to pay heed to the smoothness in which the movie is made. She's doing the opposite. Now remember, She's demanding that actual PGA credit. Now, Justin here, he's just being too nice. These are things he should have never allowed to happen in the first place. But he was keeping her happy, maintaining harmony. He's going to have to toughen up because you can't let your actors walk all over you like this. As he says, this concession quickly proved regrettable. Every little inch he's giving her in the beginning is letting her know that she can start taking miles. Now, what about her style? Which is one of the things the real-life Blake Lively gets criticized for. But now her character, the paparazzi's out. The movie's filming. You often see pictures of people when they're filming that get snapped by the paparazzi when it's out on public streets. This is what happens. There's photos published of her in her hand-picked wardrobe. When these get put out in the media, they get criticized. It brings so much backlash that Sony contacts Justin with concerns about these photos affecting the film's reception. That's how bad this wardrobe is. Sony's afraid it looks so bad, people aren't going to want to see the film. Because she had no business picking her wardrobe. She is not a wardrobe expert. There's a reason these people are hired in the first place, and that the actors don't just come in whatever they want to wear. And there's a footnote here with a little more information. As I said earlier, Lily Bloom's character is supposed to be 23. Blake's 37, so she's concerned about this. She wants the author to put out a statement explaining why someone of her age is playing this role. So the author does. But Blake ends up unhappy about it because she didn't say it how Blake wanted her to say it. This is a control freak. As I said, my opinion so far of Justin is that he's a very gentle, tender sort of guy. As I said, for years on his Instagram, it's been about men embracing all of the emotions, not putting away the parts of themselves that society says are weak or feminine. He's an emotional person. You can see in the speech he said to his wife at their wedding, you can see that he feels everything. You can see how easy he is to push around because he wants to make everyone around him feel comfortable and happy. So now he's been contacted by Sony with deep concerns about this wardrobe that Blake has chosen. He's the director. He has to go to her with these concerns that have been voiced by Sony. This is not a pleasant situation. For someone like Justin to have to go tell someone something that's going to hurt their feelings, that's going to be seen as an insult, it's not easy. It's gonna make him emotional. So he has to go do this. So he goes to her trailer, which he says she's surrounded by her team in this trailer. They're not alone, but he has to discuss these wardrobe adjustments. He has to reassert his role. He has to tell her, you need my approval for this wardrobe. Now, in her complaint, she says that he comes in there and cries for 2 hours. She called it a lengthy outburst and says that the crew had to wait for hours while he cried in her dressing room. But he says it was a considerably long conversation. You know, that some kinds of people can't just come in and say directly, hey, Sony saw the pictures, doesn't like your wardrobe, we're going to have to adjust it, which is what he should have done. But he wanted to be kind. He wanted to be gentle. They have this heart-to-heart conversation. He lets it get too emotional. He says he got teary-eyed at one point because she complimented him. It's the manipulation. She can see he's flustered. He's having a hard time. He can't be direct. He's stepping around it. He's taking too long to say what he needs to say. It's basically him handing her the controls. When you have these two personalities, someone who's very accommodating and someone who's very manipulative, it's a disaster. Part of the conversation is actually her telling him that he's being gaslit by Sony. She's gaslighting him, actually. Why would Sony, a huge, huge production company, making how many movies simultaneously, why are they going to waste their time calling Justin to gaslight him about these pictures and what they look like and their effect on this film? Does that even make sense? But she's manipulating him here, saying there's nothing wrong with my clothes. They're just gaslighting you, even though that makes no sense. Why? Because she wants to keep the control over the wardrobe. And then, as I said, she gives him this compliment. He briefly gets emotional because this project means so much to him and he's that kind of person. But now looking back, he can see this was an ongoing pattern of manipulation and gaslighting by her, which makes much more sense than Sony trying to gaslight him. What do they possibly have to gain by gaslighting him? What are they even gaslighting him about? They're saying, you're making us look bad. Do something about these awful clothes. And she's saying, oh, leave me in charge. I think that situation is very clear. Another thing she tries to say is that he made inappropriate comments on her appearance. He was there to tell her what Sony said. She didn't like it. So she wants to make it sound like it's something else. Another text we'll see later, it's not put here. She sends him a long text describing how directors never permitted her to write her scenes for the movies she's acted in, or gave her writing credits. Well, that's normal. The scenes are written. The directors direct the actors to read their lines that are already written. It's not the actor's job to write their scenes. They're given credit for acting, which is what they're hired to do, not given writing credits. Then she brags that she's written for Ryan's movies. Now what she's getting to, oh, those awful other directors never let me do this, but I've written for Ryan. What does she want? She asks to take a pass at writing the rooftop scene. This is an important scene. This is where the characters first meet. Because it's the place they meet, it's critical for setting the tone of the movie. So he didn't want her to write this. It had been written in the book, transferred to the screenplay by a union screenwriter, and she, as an actress, wants to rewrite this key scene. But again, he lets her walk over him, says, you can rewrite it. Let's have a look at what you come up with, right? So what she comes up with, he says it's dramatically different. He feels hesitant about the changes. He tries to be nice about it. He thanks her for her passion. And then he tells her that the scene would probably fall somewhere in between the original and her version. So he doesn't commit that he's going to use her version. He's just kind of given her an answer to just try to appease her, but let her know, I'm not promising you anything, right? Some people can't handle even the slightest bit of criticism or being told no. She doesn't like it. What does she do? Silent treatment for multiple days. Silent treatment is a form of manipulation. It's a bit of a form of abuse, really. She's letting him know she is not happy. When she does talk to him later, she says it didn't feel great for me. But she doesn't just talk about herself. This is where it gets gross. It says here another mega celebrity friend. This friend is Taylor Swift. I mean, arguably the most famous singer currently. Mega celebrity can barely describe Taylor Swift. And her much more successful husband, Ryan Reynolds. She brings them into it by saying, not only did it not feel great to me, it didn't feel great to my superstar friend and my superstar husband. Letting him know these two very powerful, famous people are not happy with you. And then she says, to have my passion praised instead of my specific contribution. And there's more to this story. Again, instead of doing this at the production office, she summons her director to her home. Why? Because there he's greeted by superstar husband Ryan Reynolds, who he says greets him with enthusiastic praise for Blake's version of the scene. And not just that, guess who shows up during the meeting? Taylor Swift. Guess what Taylor says when she walks into the room? She's praising Blake's script. Tell me that's not manipulation. Tell me that's not planned. This is her letting him know, you didn't just upset me. You didn't just fail my expectations. And she uses these two superstars to intimidate him. It works. So he texts her and tells her that he liked her pages and that he didn't need Ryan and Taylor to pressure him. They were good, right? Her response is so bizarre. She brings them up again. They also know I'm not always good at making sure I'm seen and utilized for fear of threatening egos. So this manipulative language, she's making it like he didn't like her stuff because it threatened his ego. No, lady, you were the one with the ego that was threatened. She's saying, oh, I'm not good at this. But Taylor and Ryan, they're good at making sure that they're seen and utilized. They're not afraid of affecting the ease of the process. They don't care about that. And because of that, everyone listens to them with immense respect and enthusiasm. But, poor little old her, she just doesn't have that confidence. So I guess I have to stop worrying about people liking me. I don't know. But as it states, the message could not have been clearer. Justin wasn't just dealing with Blake. He was dealing with her dragons. Now, what does that mean? Her dragons are two of the most influential and wealthy celebrities in the world who were not afraid to make things very difficult for him. Okay, so what is this dragon thing? So we see this friendly conversation and we see him giving in. He says, also was working on the rooftop scene today. I really love what you did. It really does help a lot. Makes it so much more fun and interesting. And I would have felt that way without Ryan and Taylor. You really are a talent across the board. Really excited and grateful to do this together. It just makes me sick. This is just, you can just see the threats worked on him. And here he is, accepting a scene he doesn't even like for his movie. But he gave in to her. And now, to manipulate him, she's going to give him a big ol' reward. That's very appreciated and means a lot. I'm deeply inspired by the film we're going to make outside of the success of this book. We have such an opportunity to not only surprise people who love the book, but reach an even bigger audience by making an undeniably dynamic and also commercial film. And here come the little pats on his head for giving in to her. The moment that excited me the most the other day was when you said you're not funny. You are going to kill that rooftop scene. You know it, I'm sure. Even though it was said in playful self-deprecation that we all participate in, it made me think of the process as a whole. Please know, I trust that on that day, you've got me. And I hope that you trust that I've got you if you want it. We're in this together, and we are two of this most determined people I know. I think she meant the. We also have very high bars set for ourselves. To collaborate with that type of partner is a gift that neither of us will squander, because we both care too much about the result and also the experience. I have no motives except for you to win. As a director, as an actor, as a studio, as a writer, if you win, I win. If you win, our movie wins. We are aligned, and I will bring everything I have to this. As for someone, and Ryan and someone else, one of these we know is Taylor, but I don't know who this third person is, but apparently she used somebody else we didn't know of yet. For that matter, I'm the luckiest on the planet to have them as my dance moms level stage moms. They are embarrassingly effusive. Again, reminding him, they are her supporters on a dance mom's level. Can you feel the manipulation in that? That said, they're also my most trusted partners and the people I go to first with anything creative I touch. And I'm the person they each go to first. Because we all know between the three, she's the least known, the least accomplished, but she's trying to say they come to me first. These two huge, massive celebrities come to me first. That reciprocal creativity and support has been one of my life's greatest and most fulfilling gifts. When they loved and signed off on the pages, I felt good to send them to you. They asked what you thought specifically after. They checked in so many times. Can you see what she's doing? She's letting him know that this is how it's going to be. These two superstars are there right behind her. They're going to be asking. They're going to be checking in. They're going to be promoting her. I told them that you laughed a bunch and said it's probably a blend, but you appreciate my passion so much. Now comes the chastising, which of course didn't feel great for me. But not just me. Or them. Letting him know when you disappoint me, you're disappointing two of the most famous people on earth. To have my passion praised instead of any specific contribution, or even just that you didn't like the pages, which was fine also. I just ignored you for several days, but, it was fine. So I think they wanted you and me to see how they felt about the work, because they've been by my side for far too many experiences where I've been overlooked. Don't overlook me, Justin. Taylor and Ryan will be mad. I spoke to you about this when we first met. They've watched me handwrite scripts because the director is too afraid to send the FDX file, yet he scans and has someone hand type all 120 pages of my pencil rewrites. They've watched me be hired as a writer and paid a significant fee for it, but on the condition that I never ask for credit, which I couldn't care about. It's more the principle of the dynamics at play. So she's saying that producers have used her work without her credit. I hope they, in depositions, make her come up with proof of that. And now back to Taylor and Ryan, who are so invested in this. They've watched the other side of it too, where I'm told at signing, that I'm wanted as a true collaborator, but once we get to work, I'm really just wanted as a yes man, audience, and actor. Well, that's what you're hired for. You're an actress. That's not enough. She hasn't laid it on thick enough or name dropped enough. Both Ryan and Taylor have established themselves as absolute titans, as writers and storytellers outside of their primary gig, just singing or just acting, or whoever this other person is that she's name dropped, just directing. I'm so lucky to have them as creative barometers. So she's got the #1 singer on earth, a very high up actor, and a very high up director that are so interested in her career, so behind her. I'm so lucky to have them as creative barometers, but also to have them as the people who prop me up and make sure I'm seen for all I can and do offer. Do you get that? Do you get that? These 3 people, these 3 super celebrities, make sure that she gets seen for all she can do because they know firsthand all I contribute. They also know I'm not always as good at making sure I'm seen and utilized for fear of threatening egos or fear of affecting the ease of the process. And that part was already shared earlier, so I'm not going to read that again. Then the cringiest of the cringe. If you ever get around to watching Game of Thrones, you'll appreciate that I'm Khaleesi. And like her, I happen to have a few dragons. For better or for worse, but usually for better. Because my dragons also protect those I fight for. So really, we all benefit from those gorgeous monsters of mine. You will too. I can promise you. The manipulation. She should be embarrassed that people are reading this. I don't know if she has the awareness to be embarrassed, but she should be embarrassed about this. This is a threat and a promise for protection by her dragons at the same time. My dragons will either fight you or they will protect you too. Can you imagine saying these things to your director? This is embarrassing. I swear this woman never progressed past the age of 13 mentally, emotionally. And what's even more interesting about this whole thing that she goes through all this trouble to say that Ryan and Taylor are behind her and supportive and they signed off on her and they signed off on her script. And then she says this in an interview.
Especially that rooftop scene that you first appear on.
Great?
I saw in another interview you said that Ryan actually, your husband Ryan Reynolds, wrote part of that rooftop scene.
No,
Is that
he
true?
did. Yeah, that's, I mean, I would have to compare it to the original one, but that's 90-something, 99% his. Yeah, he just added, I mean, Chrissy Hall wrote an incredible screenplay. It was, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this film. But also, there are natural tweaks and modifications that come in when the actor is hired and you're trying to infuse your own personality and your own authenticity. And to me...
So where does it go from here? Now once she's let him know exactly where he falls, either threatened by the dragons or protected by the dragons, or you don't take what I do, I'm gonna not speak to you for days. Now she begins to change the scripts daily. This upsets the producers, the director, the studio, everyone. The production schedule is already planned in advance because the script is written. She's supposed to show up and read her lines and be filmed. But now, because she keeps changing the script every day, the whole production crew stressed out, time wasted. These people have their lines, they have their script. She rewrites them, they gotta change their lines too. Not to mention the financial strain that the production company has to pay to waste all this time. We got a long way to go, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna stop here and we will pick this up again later. Let me know in comments what you think of this story. I know it's something different than we usually do, but it's a trending legal topic right now with lots and lots of pages and pages of things to cover. I'll be back with part 2 very soon. Till then, this is Cassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned.